The first thing I remember after the car hit the curb was the smell: wet leather, coffee gone cold, the metallic tang of a million regrets. I remember the rain on the windshield turning the city into a smear of neon and grief, and I remember Ethan laughing like we were the only two people in the world who mattered. That laugh used to feel like home. It doesn't anymore. Now it is the sound I wake up from and the sound I turn to at night when I can't sleep, like a needle stuck in the same groove. My name is Maya Carter. I'm 34. I live in an old row house in Capitol Hill that's too small for the secrets I keep. And for the last 8 years, I'd been married to a man who taught me how to measure my life in the way he needed it to fit: career, charity dinners, home cooked weekends. Perfectly arranged, perfectly contained. Ethically ambiguous sometimes, selfish often, charming always. He wore the same navy blazer to meetings and to apologies. He smiled at the right times. He smiled like a man who'd never been asked to look at his reflection too closely. That night, 2 winters ago, January 17th, clear as if etched on glass, he smiled at some woman across a bar, and I watched my minutes with him unspool in my hands. I watched the life I thought I was building leak away into another man's story. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I walked out because walking felt cleaner than breaking. Clean is a lie people tell themselves when they're too afraid to dig beneath the floorboards. I didn't tell anyone the truth after that first night. I told my sister Rachel I was taking time to recenter. I told Lena, my best friend, that Ethan and I had decided on a trial separation. I told my boss, Daniel, that my head was elsewhere and to please keep major project updates off my desk for a minute. I told myself that the ground would settle if I kept moving. I lied because truth has edges. And because truth, I was certain, naively, dangerously, would only make more people hurt. The first micro crack came from the boring place secrets live in: paperwork. A month after I moved out of our house, clearing the apartment felt like performing archaeology on a life I'd once adored. In a drawer behind the cutlery, where his cufflinks used to sit, I found a stack of receipts clipped together with a rubber band. A lunch, a hotel, a florist, each one stamped with the name of a small boutique hotel on the other side of town. The dates threaded a pattern, the numbers fit like a cipher. Beneath the receipts was something colder, a business card that wasn't his. Caroline Monroe, it read, brand consultant. Available for collaboration. Her number, her work email, a tagline about elevating personal brands. The cardboard was thick and white, the sort of thing an image-obsessed woman would carry. I pressed my thumb against the ink and felt like I had pressed against a wound. I didn't confront him then. I burned the receipts in my fireplace at 3 in the morning and watched the paper curl into black ash, the flames making elegant demands of my past. I told myself burning was enough, that if I destroyed the traces, the truth would die with them. Someone had once said revenge is a calculus, not a catharsis. I didn't understand then how right and wrong were only useful when you were the person making the rules. The second pain arrived less like a stab and more like salt in a fresh break. My mother called on a Tuesday, voice clipped. "Maya, your father asked about Ethan," she said. My father, a man who'd always been averse to drama, asked like someone checking a weather report. He'd heard something, a little seed that sprouted into speculation. Rumors travel faster than truth, and the truth in my marriage loves to hide in crowds. "Don't give them anything," I told my mother, though I knew that by saying that I had given them everything. I deleted messages and hid photos. I told everyone simple, neutral versions of my life: I'm okay. We're trying to work through things, and I meant them in the same way you mean a bandage when the wound keeps bleeding through. It covers, but it won't heal. Then Lena brought me coffee and a threat. She sat in my kitchen, one hand wrapped around a mug, the other twisting her ring. She always looks younger when she worries. The way her jaw tightens makes her seem smaller than the force she really is. "I met someone the other night," she said, slow like she was choosing a sentence for a play. "At a fundraiser, they said they'd seen Ethan with a woman. They said it wasn't Caroline." I felt my pulse attempt to outrun my breath. "Where?" I asked, too sharp. "Different part of the city." She didn't say more. "But Lena," she added, "people are talking. I don't want you blindsided." Talking. The word tasted like bile. Everything we are in a city, we are conversations. A name can be a rumor or a prosecution. For a while after that, the city seemed to fold in on itself, like a map creased until the ink blurred. My house, his office, the boutique hotel on another corner, a bar on Third where he took his meetings that smelled like whiskey and power. I started paying attention the way a spy pays attention, small hours with big intent. I watched his patterns: the gym at dawn, the meetings stacked like dominoes, the dinners with donors. I noticed the things that know you intimately: how he tapped his watch when he was lying, how he avoided the word us and used we when it suited him. I tracked receipts when they showed up in my trash. I followed threads he thought severed. I am not proud of the person I became. I am only telling you what I did because silence had a way of consuming me. At a lunch meeting with Daniel, my boss, the man who hired me when I thought I'd never be able to leave the past behind, His kindness felt like a rope I could cling to. He'd always liked stability. Take your time, he said, pushing a glass of water toward me when my hand shook. We can redistribute your accounts. Consider it a sabbatical. I lied to him the same way I lied to 1,000 people. I accepted his mercy but didn't intend to take it. Sleeping less, breathing less, I did something far bolder than revenge, something that felt like survival. I began to collect facts, not to hurt but to understand, to pin down the moving pieces so that when I finally acted, I would be precise, surgical. My investigations were not elegant. I drove past his office and memorized the license plates that came and went. I learned who his regulars were at a bar that smelled of tobacco and old money. I found a woman named Caroline on social media, polished, smiling in magazine shot photos, always with a glass of something fancy. She had 300,000 followers who loved her for her wardrobe and her voice. She was everything Ethan could sell for a reputation refresh. But the Garden of Lies has dozens of paths. One night I found a photo on a camera card I picked up from an old box in the attic. Ethan had a way of leaving things behind in corners. The photo was of a housewarming party, my face in mid-laughter, Ethan's hand at the small of my back. In the background, almost invisible, was a woman I'd never met. Hair cropped, eyes like river stones. She glanced at the camera with a look I recognized, the look of a woman who knows where the weaknesses are in a structure and is not afraid to exploit them. The file's metadata told me the date, 3 months after we'd agreed to work on things. Betrayal, it turned out, likes to be documented. That was a micro hook if ever there was one, the kind that turns a simmer into a boil. I didn't confront him. I did something worse. I started building a case. I bought a cheap pen camera, learned how to read patterns in social calendars, and I asked questions to people who had no idea what they were revealing. People who think they're being helpful always give you exactly what you want. They tell you headlines, and you make a story out of them. There is a cruelty that comes with mastery. It is not pretty. The more I learned, the better I understood that Ethan was both incidental and intentional in ways that sharpened into particular malice. He had a history of erasing women the way certain people erase drafts, quietly, with clinical efficiency. He courted them into usefulness, warmed them up, and when their warmth was spent, he shelved them behind conference calls and philanthropy. He told them he loved them in the same manner he signed contracts, formal, full of clauses. This is not to say Caroline was blameless. She had chosen to play a part in his narrative. She had also created her own. The real rupture, though, came from Lena and the one thing she couldn't keep to herself. A week after the camera photo, Lena forwarded me a text she said she'd received by mistake. Are you free Friday, 8 p.m., private dinner, I have something for you. It had come from an unfamiliar number. There was a photo attached, Ethan, Caroline, and another woman, this one older, with laugh lines and a look of practiced surprise, seated in a small dining room that smelled of cinnamon and performance. The caption read, briefly, making arrangements. This angered me, yes, but mostly it mobilized something colder, strategy. If he was making arrangements, I would make mine. If he thought he could rewrite our story with a new co-author, I would write my epilogue. They'd thought they'd been cautious. They were not. That Friday I went alone to the restaurant, the kind of dim, candlelit place that feeds on hushed confessions. I sat at the bar and ordered a drink that tasted like regret and honey. My hands didn't shake any more the way they'd been shaking for weeks. The shaking had been replaced by a stillness that felt like iron. The hostess showed me to a corner table where I could see all the exits. A habit in the last dangerous days of my marriage had been to look for exits. I wasn't the only one who'd learned to leave a scene quickly. They arrived late, as they always do. Ethan with the rehearsed smile, Caroline with the measured laugh, the older woman with a diamond watch that flashed like a lighthouse in the dark. I watched the conversation like a surgeon watches a beating heart. They didn't see me at first. They were speaking quietly, as if secrets were something to protect with a pulse. I listened because listening is a kind of weapon. You don't understand the leverage we have, the older woman said at one point. Her voice was syrup and threat. If this goes wrong, she let the sentence hang like an invitation. Ethan's hand found the back of Caroline's chair. It was an ownership gesture disguised as affection. I felt something inside me break in 1,000 precise places. I stood and walked toward them like a person crossing a field to take a photograph. When Ethan caught my eye, his face changed in a way I've never seen on him. Small, quick panic, like a man who has misfiled his life. He rose, and the room tilted. Conversations edited themselves into something cruel then. There were accusations that sounded like a game. Words like misunderstanding and professional and friendship moved in circles around us. The older woman placed her hand over mine. Is there a problem? She asked, all sweetness and teeth. You know there's a problem, I said. The words came out like rocks. You know what you did. Caroline's smile froze. Ethan tried to speak, to explain, to apologize in a way that felt more like legal mitigation than remorse. For a moment there was a potential for resolution. a chance to rewrite the ledger. He offered up an explanation that sounded like many he'd given: poor timing, bad judgment, an affair that was happening in moments when it meant something to him. The old woman tutted, as if the whole scene was a theatrical disappointment. Then the hostess cleared our plates. The candles guttered. I left that night with a bill and a promise to myself that I would not be the woman who laughed at dinner parties while others wrote a different story for her. I walked into the rain and something in my chest rearranged into plans, not panic. Back at my apartment, I started assembling what I had: the receipts, the photos, the texts Lena had forwarded. I made lists. I labeled things. I created a folder on my laptop named simply Evidence. Naming something gives you power over it, it makes it manageable. It also makes it harder to forget the things you do to survive. It was at this point, precise, small, like the first shift in a tide, that I decided I didn't want chaos. I wanted control. I wanted him to feel what I felt, but more precisely. I wanted him to see the architecture of his choices collapse under a light he'd never anticipated. Revenge, I learned, isn't always about making the other person suffer. Sometimes it's about making the other person witness their own undoing. The micro hook here was a set of bank statements I intercepted, anonymous, but enough to show a pattern of reimbursement to a private vendor. It read like a map. There were places on that map that would be expensive to obliterate. There were names that, if revealed, would make people who had always benefited from Ethan's discretion nervous. I sat there in the dark, with the statements spread across my kitchen table, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had a script in my hands. I wasn't naive. I knew that taking this farther could cost me in ways I wasn't ready to imagine. I've seen the way the legal world eats people who try to bite back, yet the thought of doing nothing felt worse than any of the possible consequences. I would either be the woman who broke quietly, or the woman who used every available tool to make a revelation that couldn't be ignored. The last thing I did before I slept that night was text Lena. "Keep the date open. I need you." She replied immediately with a string of heart emojis and a single word: always. That too was a promise and a weapon. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay on my couch with the city humming through the windows, my phone face down on the coffee table like it might start talking on its own. Around 4 in the morning, I got up and made tea I didn't drink. I stood barefoot on cold tile and realized something quietly terrifying. I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had been replaced by clarity, and clarity is dangerous when it arrives all at once. By 8 a.m., I was dressed like myself again: black slacks, soft gray sweater, hair pulled back with intention. I went to work not because I needed the paycheck, but because routine is camouflage. At the office, I smiled, nodded, answered emails. Daniel stopped by my desk. "You okay?" he asked gently. "I am," I said, and this time it wasn't a lie. Not the whole truth, but not a lie either. By noon, my phone buzzed. "Ethan, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing back: "Tonight, 7, public place." He responded immediately, like a man relieved to be given instructions. Of course, I chose the place carefully: a wine bar near DuPont Circle with low lighting and mirrors on the walls. Mirrors make people conscious of themselves. They also make it harder to lie convincingly. I arrived early and took a seat where I could see the door. When Ethan walked in, he looked smaller than I remembered, like someone who'd been living in a reduced version of his life. "Maya," he said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. "Sit," I said. He did. His eyes kept flicking toward the mirrors. "Good. I know how this looks," he began. I raised one finger. "Before you start, understand this: I didn't come here to argue. I came here to listen, so choose your words carefully." That stopped him. People like Ethan thrive on debate, on reframing. "Listening unsettles them," he inhaled. "Caroline is a professional contact. The dinner you saw, it was about consulting. The older woman is Margaret Lewis. She manages private foundations. Nothing inappropriate happened." I tilted my head. "You're lying." He flinched, a micro expression, but enough. "I've been collecting facts," I continued calmly. "Hotel receipts, bank reimbursements, photos, messages, patterns. You didn't just cheat on me, Ethan. You used me as cover while you built an entire second life." His mouth opened, closed. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't understand. I know about the nonprofit accounts. I know about the shell reimbursements. I know about the private consulting dinners that weren't consulting at all." His face drained of color. "That's not," he started. "Illegal," I finished. "Maybe not. Unethical, absolutely. Reputation destroying, without question." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "What do you want?" There it was. Not apology, not remorse, transaction. "I want honesty," I said. "For once in your life." He laughed weakly. "You're threatening me?" "I'm informing you," I corrected. "There's a difference." He stared at the table, then back at me. "I never meant to hurt you." I smiled, slow and cold. "Intent doesn't erase impact. You taught me that." When I left the bar, my hands were steady. That scared me more than anything else. Over the next week, things accelerated. Margaret Lewis canceled 2 public appearances. Caroline deleted several Instagram posts. Ethan stopped calling. Silence from a man like him isn't peace, it's preparation. Lena came over one night with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat cross-legged on my living room floor, curtains open, the city blinking through the windows. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I'm sure about not going back." She nodded. "Then I'm with you." That was subplot 1, loyalty. I'd always believed loyalty was passive, standing by someone quietly. I was learning it could be active, strategic, even risky. Subplot 2 arrived disguised as coincidence. 2 days later, I got an email from Caroline. Subject, "Can we talk?" I stared at it, heart pounding once, then settling. I replied with a single sentence. "Sure, coffee tomorrow, noon." We met in a minimalist cafe in Georgetown, all concrete and glass. Caroline looked exactly like her photos, immaculate, controlled. But up close, I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers tightened around her cup. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I didn't do it for you," I replied. "But go ahead." She winced. "Ethan told me you were volatile." I laughed softly. "Of course he did." She took a breath. "I didn't know about you at first, not really. He said you were separated, that it was mutual." "Is that what he said about the others too?" I asked. Her eyes flickered. "Others?" I leaned back. "You're not the first, you won't be the last." Her face shifted, anger, humiliation, calculation. "He told me he loved me." "I'm sure he did." Silence stretched between us. "What do you want?" she asked finally, the same question, different mouth. "I want you to stop protecting him," I said, "because he won't protect you when this turns." She studied me. "And if I do? Then you'll go down with him," I said simply. "And unlike me, you won't have the benefit of public sympathy." Her lips parted, closed, she nodded once sharply. "I'll think about it," she said. "Do that," I replied, "but think fast." When she left, I felt a strange mix of triumph and grief. She wasn't my enemy, not really. She was another woman sold a story that only benefited one man. That night, I received an anonymous envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside, photocopies of internal emails. Ethan's name everywhere, dates, language that danced dangerously close to impropriety. Someone else was watching. Micro hook number 3 landed hard. I called the number written in pencil on the back of the envelope. A woman answered. Her voice was low, controlled. "You're Maya Carter," she said. "Yes. My name is Julia Reyes," she said. "I used to work for Ethan." "Used to? I think he's about to sacrifice you," she continued. "And I'm done being collateral damage." I closed my eyes. "Meet me," I said. We met in Rock Creek Park, walking paths instead of sitting. Movement keeps conversations honest. Julia told me everything, how Ethan used assistants as buffers, how money moved just legally enough, how women were rotated and discarded. "He's careful," she said, "but he's arrogant. He thinks no one will compare notes." "He's wrong," I said. She stopped walking, faced me. "If I help you, I lose everything." "So do I replied, "but I'm already losing." She nodded slowly. "Then let's be precise." That was the moment the plan stopped being theoretical. Over the next several days, I became someone else entirely. I documented, cross-referenced, verified. I consulted a lawyer not to file anything yet, but to understand the terrain. I learned what could be said, what could be shown, and what had to be timed perfectly. Daniel noticed the change. "You're focused," he said one afternoon. "I am," I replied. He hesitated. "Whatever you're dealing with, just don't burn yourself down." I smiled sadly. Sometimes fire is the only way to see what survives. The final trigger came unexpectedly. Rachel called me late, voice shaking. "Maya, Mom heard something about Ethan from church. Church gossip is nuclear, it spreads without mercy." "What did she hear?" I asked. "That he's being investigated, that you knew, that you stayed quiet?" My stomach dropped. He was already shifting the narrative. That night, Ethan showed up at my door, unannounced, desperate. I didn't invite him in. "We need to talk," he said. "We already did," I replied. "You're ruining my life," he hissed. I laughed, actually laughed. "No, Ethan, I'm just not protecting it anymore." His face hardened. "You think you're smarter than me?" "I know I'm more honest," I said, "and that's enough." He stepped closer. "If you do this, I'll make sure you regret it." I leaned in. "You already tried." I closed the door. Behind it, my hands finally shook, but I didn't back down. Because betrayal had taken so much from me, my marriage, my safety, my silence, and I was done paying for someone else's choices. The reckoning was coming. And this time I wasn't going to look away. The morning after Ethan showed up at my door, the city felt different. Not quieter, sharper. Like everything had been outlined in ink overnight. I walked to the corner cafe and noticed how people avoided eye contact when they were hiding something, how they leaned in when they wanted to be heard. I ordered black coffee and drank it standing up because sitting felt indulgent and I didn't trust indulgence anymore. Julia texted first. "We need to move. He's panicking," I replied immediately. "So am I, let's use it." We met later that day in a small conference room Julia had access to through a friend. No windows, no names on the door. The kind of place where decisions get made that never appear in minutes. She laid out folders, copies, timelines, emails printed and highlighted. Seeing it all together was like watching a storm from above. Patterns don't look like patterns until you step back. "He's been grooming donors," Julia said. Not illegally, strategically, promising access, promising influence. And women, I said, she nodded. And women? Subplot 3, the one I hadn't anticipated, surfaced quietly then, my own reputation. I had been invisible in his world, the supportive wife who hosted dinners and smiled. If this broke open, I would become something else entirely. Whistleblower, scorned woman, liability, I had to decide which version I could live with. I don't want money, I said. I don't want a settlement, I want distance. And truth? Julia studied me. Truth costs more than money. I know. We agreed on a sequence. Timing was everything, not a data dump, not a public spectacle. A controlled release, facts placed where they would do the most work without destroying innocent people in the blast radius. I would not be him, I refused. That night Caroline called, her voice was brittle. I'm in. I closed my eyes. Then we do this clean. I have messages, she said. Voice notes, he thought disappearing messages were safe. They're not, I said. Nothing is. We met 2 nights later at her apartment, white walls, expensive furniture that felt staged. She looked smaller than before, the confidence drained out of her like a punctured tire. I didn't think it would come to this, she said. Neither did I replied. But here we are. She handed me a flash drive, our fingers brushed. For a second, there was a shared recognition, not friendship, not forgiveness, but understanding. We were two women standing in the wreckage of the same lie. As I left, she said softly, he said you were weak. I paused at the door. He needed me to be. The next week unfolded in controlled chaos. Margaret Lewis resigned from 2 boards to focus on personal matters. A journalist I'd quietly contacted carefully, cautiously asked for confirmation on background details I'd provided anonymously. Daniel pulled me aside at work. Are you in trouble? He asked. No, I said, but someone else is. He searched my face. If you need legal support, I have it, I said. That wasn't entirely true, but it would be. Ethan stopped calling. Instead, his lawyer reached out. This is escalating unnecessarily, the email read. We'd like to resolve matters privately. I forwarded it to my attorney, a woman named Susan Hart who spoke in clean sentences and didn't waste syllables. Do not respond, she said over the phone. Silence is leverage. The first article dropped on a Thursday morning. Not a headline, a column, carefully worded, questions raised, patterns implied. Ethan's name mentioned once, deep in the piece, like a hook you don't notice until it's in you. My phone exploded. Rachel cried. My mother demanded answers. Lena came over without texting and sat on my couch like a guard dog. You okay? She asked. I don't know, I said, but I'm still standing. Ethan emailed that night, not through lawyers, through his personal account. You've crossed a line. I stared at the screen, then typed back exactly one sentence. You drew it. The second article came 3 days later. This one named names, included documents, quotes from former associates. Julia's voice, though anonymized, cut cleanly through the page. Caroline's messages were paraphrased, their intimacy unmistakable. By the end of the week, Ethan was on leave. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollowed out, like a house after a storm, walls standing but furniture ruined. Revenge doesn't fill you, it empties you of illusions. One night alone, I opened the old photo again, the one from the party. I stared at my own face, mid-laughter, unaware. I whispered an apology to that woman. I'm sorry it took me this long. The reckoning wasn't finished. Ethan requested mediation. I agreed. We met in a neutral office downtown. He looked older, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Power ages badly when it's stripped of context. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. I did, I replied. You just didn't think I would. He rubbed his hands together. You've destroyed everything I built. I met his gaze. No, I revealed it. Silence settled between us. This was the man I'd loved. This was the man who'd rewritten our marriage as a convenience. What do you want now? He asked. I want my name back, I said, and I want you to stop lying about me. He exhaled. I can do that. And, I added, you will never contact me again. He nodded. Agreed. When it was over, I walked out into sunlight that felt earned. Weeks passed. The city moved on, as cities do. New scandals, new conversations. Ethan faded into a cautionary tale whispered at fundraisers. Caroline rebranded honestly this time, I hoped. Julia found work elsewhere. Quieter, safer, I stayed. I painted my apartment. I slept. I cooked meals that took time. I let my mother fuss. I let Lena stay over on nights when silence felt too loud. One evening, Daniel invited me to dinner, not a date exactly, just 2 people acknowledging survival. We talked about books, about travel, about the strange relief that comes when pretending ends. You're different, he said. I know, I replied. I like her better. The last micro hook came unexpectedly in the form of a letter, handwritten. No return address. It was from Margaret Lewis. You were right, it read. I built a life on leverage and mistook it for loyalty. Thank you for ending the illusion. I folded the letter and put it away. Closure doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with recognition. I am not proud of everything I did, but I am proud that I did not disappear. Betrayal tried to reduce me to a footnote in someone else's story. Revenge was never the point. Reclamation was, I am still here, I am still speaking. And my life finally belongs to me again. The The strangest part of the aftermath was how ordinary everything looked. The sidewalks still cracked in the same places. The barista still misspelled my name. Couples still argued softly on corners like their lives weren't about to split open. I had expected thunder, or at least a permanent ringing in my ears. Instead, there was quiet, and in that quiet, consequences kept arriving like mail you don't remember signing up for. 3 weeks after the mediation, Susan called me. "They're opening a formal inquiry," she said. "Who they?" I asked, though I already knew. "A regulatory committee connected to one of the foundations. It's not criminal yet, but it's real." I closed my eyes. "Am I exposed?" "No," she said. "You're protected, but you're visible." Visibility, another cost. That afternoon, a woman stopped me outside my office building. Mid-40s, careful makeup, eyes tired in a way that felt familiar. "Maya Carter?" she asked. "Yes," she swallowed. "I'm Erin. I was married to him before you." The ground didn't shift, it dropped. We went to a nearby park and sat on opposite ends of a bench, like two strangers sharing a weather report. Erin told me about her years with Ethan, the charm, the gaslighting disguised as ambition, the way her doubts had been reframed as instability. She de-signed an NDA in exchange for peace she never fully received. "I thought it was me," she said, "until I read the article." I felt a deep, aching anger then, not hot, but vast. "I'm sorry," I said. It felt insufficient. She shook her head. "You did what I couldn't, that matters." When she left, she hugged me briefly, like a passing of something fragile and heavy. I sat there long after, staring at my hands, realizing that my story had never been just mine. It had been braided with others, unseen, unheard. That night I dreamed of doors opening, closing, locking behind me. The inquiry escalated faster than expected. More people came forward, former assistants, donors who didn't like seeing their names adjacent to ambiguity. City's whisper network turned into something louder, less polite. Ethan tried once more. This time it was a voicemail. His voice sounded unfamiliar, strained, almost humble. "I know you won't answer," he said. "I just need you to know I never thought it would go this far." I deleted it without replying. Lena came over with pizza and wine and the kind of concern that doesn't ask permission. "You're carrying a lot," she said. "I know." "Let me carry some," she insisted, so I told her about Aaron. About the inquiry, about the fear that sometimes woke me up at night, that I'd become defined entirely by what I'd survived. "You won't," she said firmly. "This is a chapter, not the title." Subplot threads tightened. Rachel called less often, but when she did, her voice was softer, more careful. My parents stopped asking me to explain myself to people who had no right to explanations. At work, Daniel offered me a promotion, quietly, deliberately, as if to say I was seen for more than my personal upheaval. "You don't have to take it now," he said. "I will," I replied. "I'm ready." Caroline sent me a message one morning, just signed with a new firm. "Clean start, thank you." I stared at it for a long time before replying, "Take care of yourself." Julia and I met one last time for coffee. She looked lighter. "I'm moving," she said. "West Coast, new job." "I'm glad," I said. And I meant it. Before she left, she hesitated. "You know he still thinks of this as something that happened to him." I smiled sadly. "Of course he does." As winter edged toward spring, the inquiry released its findings. No charges, sanctions, public reprimands. Ethan resigned to pursue private opportunities. The phrasing was almost poetic in its emptiness. The press cycle moved on. I didn't. One evening, months later, I found myself back at the same wine bar where I'd confronted him. Different table, different version of me. I ordered a drink I actually liked and watched my reflection in the mirror, older, yes, but clearer. A woman who had chosen to remain. A man approached, mid-30s, kind eyes. "Is this seat taken?" "No," I said. "We talked about nothing important, then about books, then about how the city changes you." There was no spark I needed to chase, no future I needed to secure, just a moment that belonged to me. When I left, alone and content, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, almost. Instead, I opened the message. "I was wrong about you." No name, no apology, no request. I didn't respond. I walked home through streets that felt less hostile now, my steps steady, my shoulders uncurled. Betrayal had tried to make me smaller, quieter, easier to erase. It failed. And for the first time since the night the curb jumped into my headlights, I felt something like peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else's behavior, but the durable kind you build yourself, brick by brick, truth by truth. I unlocked my door, turned on the lights, and stepped fully into the life that was waiting for me. I thought the ending would arrive with a sound, a slam, a verdict, applause, something cinematic enough to justify the cost. Instead, it came the way most real endings do, quietly, on a morning that didn't announce itself as important. It was late April. The dogwoods were blooming, stubbornly beautiful, and my alarm went off at 6:30 like it always did. I lay there for a moment, listening to my own breathing, waiting for the familiar weight to settle on my chest. It didn't. That was how I knew something had finally changed. I got up, showered, dressed, moved through my apartment without bracing for impact. The mirror showed a woman who looked like me again, not the hyper-vigilant version, not the hollowed-out one, but someone inhabiting her body with intention. I touched the scar on my wrist from years ago, a childhood accident, and thought about how many marks we carry that never show. At work, the promotion became official. New title, new responsibilities, no side glances, no whispered sympathy. Daniel shook my hand like it was a beginning, not a consolation prize. You earned this, he said. I believed him. That afternoon, Susan called one last time. It's done, she said. The inquiry is closed, no further action, you're clear. Thank you, I said. The words felt small compared to the enormity of what she'd helped me navigate, but gratitude doesn't always need ornament. After I hung up, I sat alone in my office and let myself feel it, not triumph, not revenge, but completion. The kind that seals a chapter without erasing it. That night, I hosted dinner for the first time in years. Not a fundraiser, not a performance, just people I trusted, Lena, Rachel, a couple of friends I'd neglected when my life narrowed to survival. I cooked too much food and burned the garlic bread. We laughed, we talked over each other. Someone spilled wine and nobody panicked. At one point, Lena raised her glass. To Maya, she said, for choosing herself. I rolled my eyes, but my throat tightened. To all of us, I said instead, for staying. Later, after everyone left, I cleaned up slowly, deliberately. I didn't rush the quiet away. I let it exist without fear. When I finally sat on my couch, my phone buzzed again, another unknown number, another ghost from the margins. This time, the message was longer. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see now what I did. I built my life on extraction, from women, from trust, from silence. Losing you was the first real consequence I've ever faced. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing like the woman I'd been months ago. No spike of anger, no temptation to respond. I set the phone down and turned it face down the way I used to, but this time it wasn't avoidance, it was choice. A week later, I ran into Erin again by accident at a bookstore. She looked lighter, too. I'm writing, she told me, not for publication, just to remember myself. That's brave, I said. She smiled. So are you. We hugged, longer this time. Two women no longer orbiting the same man, finally allowed to stand in our own gravity. Spring deepened, summer edged closer. Life continued, not as a reward, but as a responsibility I was finally willing to accept. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I didn't want to become brittle. Healing, I learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about metabolizing the truth so it stops poisoning you. In one session, my therapist asked, "What do you think revenge gave you?" I considered it. It didn't give me anything, I said slowly. It took something away, the illusion that staying silent was safer. She nodded. And what did speaking cost you? I didn't answer right away. Fear, I said finally, but it gave me myself back. On a warm evening in June, I walked past the old row house Ethan and I once shared. The windows were dark. A for sale sign leaned slightly to the left, like it had given up on standing straight. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my steps sure, my hands empty. Later that night, alone on my balcony, I watched the city lights blink on one by one. I thought about all the women whose names never make it into articles, whose reckonings are private, incomplete, unfinished. I thought about how betrayal thrives in isolation and how power depends on silence. I had broken that silence, not perfectly, not gently, but honestly. And honesty, I've learned, is its own kind of justice. I'm not the woman I was when this began. I'm not untouched. I'm not innocent in the way I once believed innocence worked. But I am free. Free from waiting for apologies that will never come. Free from carrying other people's secrets like they are my burden to bear. Free from the version of love that requires disappearance. If you're listening to this story because you recognize yourself somewhere in it, know this. The moment you stop protecting the lie is the moment your life starts belonging to you again. Not because the world becomes fair, but because you finally do.